An empire worth billions, built entirely on meth. A drug lord who never held a gun, never resorted to violence, just a quiet mastermind swimming in money. A decade-long manhunt spanning the globe, but he was caught, alone, in an airport. The man who evaded the world for years fell because of one tiny slip. This is the story of the world's biggest drug lord, Tse Chi Lop. Tse Chi Lop's journey from a quiet youth in Guangzhou to becoming one of the most notorious drug lords in the world is nothing short of a thriller. Born on October 25, 1963, Tse grew up during a time of massive change in China, the tail end of the Cultural Revolution. He was a product of that chaotic era, finding his way into the Big Circle Gang, a criminal group formed by young men who had lived through the unrest. This was just the beginning, and Tse had a knack for connecting with the right people, something that would serve him well later in life. By the late 80s, Tse had moved to Hong Kong before finally making his way to Canada in 1988. He brought his fiancée along, and together they settled in Toronto, where he tried to live a normal life. He worked decent jobs at Fujifilm and Kodak, earning respectable wages. But something inside Tse wasn't satisfied with the simple life. The pull of his past, the criminal connections, the power, the money was too strong to ignore. And so, he couldn't resist rejoining the Big Circle Gang, this time setting up shop in Toronto. By the late 80s, the gang was looking to expand into Canada, and Tse became an important part of their plan. What happened next is something you wouldn't expect. Tse wasn't just any small-time dealer. He struck a deal with the Rizzuto crime family from Montreal, a powerful mafia group in Canada. At a time when the mafia didn't typically do business with Asian gangs, Tse bridged the gap between the two, showing the world his ability to connect people and take risks. Together, they smuggled heroin into Canada from Southeast Asia and distributed it through American mafia networks, pushing it into places as far south as Florida. In just 2 years, the Big Circle Gang controlled the heroin market in Toronto, slashing prices by over 40%. It was an operation that was as profitable as it was bold. Tse's ability to play both sides, balancing the delicate relationship between Asian gangs and traditional organized crime, was a skill that would serve him in his rise to the top. By 1997, he was the man in charge of drug transport from Southeast Asia to Canada, making him one of the most wanted criminals in the world. But Tse wasn't invincible. In 1995, the FBI caught wind of him when his associates in New York, Paul Kwok and Yong Bing Gong, were indicted. The FBI quickly turned their attention to Tse, but he was already one step ahead. By the time they got close, he had relocated to mainland China, where the US couldn't touch him. It seemed like Tse had outsmarted everyone. But as clever as he was, even he couldn't avoid fate forever. It wasn't until 1998, when he traveled to Hong Kong, that the FBI finally got their chance. With extradition treaties in place, Tse was arrested on August 12th of that year. Instead of being in a completely chaotic state, he stayed calm, collected, and almost too calm. His demeanor was described as friendly and down-to-earth, and the way he carried himself even in custody earned him the nickname gentleman-like among those around him. The man who built a billion-dollar empire was now just another prisoner. Trying to avoid a life sentence, Tse pleaded guilty to one count of conspiracy to transport heroin. His strategy was to cooperate just enough to show remorse, but without giving away too much. He even claimed he wanted to open a restaurant after he got out, hoping to take care of his sick child and elderly parents. It worked. He was given a 9-year sentence, but after serving just 6 years, he was deported back to Canada in 2006. While he was behind bars, Tse kept a low profile, never once showing the violent side that often comes with being a drug lord. In fact, he was known for being easygoing and humble, even among his fellow criminals. He seemed to have it all: the brains, the connections, the calm under pressure. But what happens when two seasoned criminals with global connections cross paths in prison? After serving his time at the Federal Correctional Institution in Elkton, Ohio, Tse was far from done. It was here, in the company of other notorious criminals, that he met Lee Chung-chak, a Hong Konger with dual Chinese-British nationality. Lee had connections and a reputation that would later help Tse build something much bigger. Together, they would go on to form Samgor, an international drug trafficking empire that would rival anything the world had ever seen. Lee had been arrested back in 1994, caught at the US-Canada border for similar crimes. He was also released in 2006 6, just like Tse. Upon his return to Canada in 2006, Tse, now with a fresh start and no longer under supervision, shifted his focus to synthetic drugs. Heroin, once his bread and butter, had lost its appeal. The demand for heroin was on the decline, and his connections with the Mafia were no longer enough to sustain his operations in North America. Instead, Tse set his sights on something even more profitable: synthetic drugs like methamphetamine. Why meth? Well, synthetic drugs were simpler to distribute. They had a higher profit margin and fewer law enforcement issues, making them the perfect choice for someone with Tse's skills. He already had a stronghold in the Golden Triangle, a region known for producing large amounts of these drugs, so it only made sense to shift gears. In 2011, Tse moved his family to Hong Kong and officially formed Samgor. Business registration records show that he and his wife set up a shell corporation, using a residential address, which was likely the front for his growing empire. Samgor's early days were marked by a unique and risky business model. Tse introduced a guaranteed delivery system. If any of the drugs were seized by law enforcement, his organization would replace them free of charge. This bold move made Tse's group incredibly attractive to criminal organizations in Australia, where Samgor would later become the biggest drug supplier. But Tse's talent didn't stop at innovation. He was also a master diplomat. He used his skills to mend fences between three major Hong Kong triads: the 14K Triad, Wo Xing Wo, and Sun Yi On. These groups had been at odds for years, but under Tse's guidance, they came together to form the backbone of Samgor. And Tse expanded his reach, recruiting criminal groups from across the globe. He formed alliances with the Yakuza in Japan, the Satudara and Comanchero motorcycle clubs, and even criminal families in Lebanon and Australia. Tse's network was vast, and it stretched across continents. By the late 2010s, Tse's Samgor had become a dominant force in the Asia-Pacific drug trade. He controlled more than 70% of Australia's meth supply and had a grip on the drug markets in Japan, South Korea, and the Philippines. In fact, Samgor's influence spread so far that the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime estimated that the Asia-Pacific drug market had grown fourfold between 2014 and 2019, largely thanks to Tse's operations. During that time, the Australian drug market skyrocketed from $15 billion to $61 billion. The numbers speak for themselves. Tse's Samgor empire generated between $8 billion and $17.7 billion annually from methamphetamine alone. By all accounts, his wealth and influence were on par with the likes of Pablo Escobar and Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. And Tse didn't just stick to drugs. He was also a master of money laundering. He used Australia-based Crown casinos to hide his profits, prompting a national inquiry into the casino's operations in 2019. Tse's life in Hong Kong was as lavish as his criminal empire. He traveled exclusively by private jet and hosted extravagant birthday parties at exclusive resorts. His protection was top tier. He hired 8 Thai kickboxers to serve as his personal bodyguards. Tse was also an avid gambler, often boasting about his connections in Macau, the gambling capital of Asia. But luck wasn't always on his side. During one casino trip, Tse lost 60 million euros in a single night. Yet, despite his low profile, Tse couldn't escape the consequences of his actions. In 2017, he was sued by the Marina Bay Sands Casino in Singapore for a gambling debt of 1.9 million Singaporean dollars. The case was just another reminder of Tse's troubled past, even as he lived a life of luxury. But as we know, empires built on crime rarely last forever. What would it take for this drug lord to finally face the music? Would Tse's empire survive, or had his luck run out? Tse's criminal activities didn't remain unnoticed for long. By 2012, his name was already making its way into the records of law enforcement agencies. It all started with an investigation by the Australian Federal Police into a Melbourne-based drug distribution network led by Suki Liu, a local greengrocer. Wiretaps on Liu's communications provided the first breakthrough, revealing the mysterious Samgor. The AFP's suspicions quickly turned towards Tse, who had been actively coordinating drug shipments from Hong Kong. By 2013, surveillance operations were able to confirm Tse's identity, aided by intelligence gathered from Hong Kong police, who had intercepted Tse meeting with key figures in Melbourne's drug ring. This was the beginning of a high-stakes international pursuit. Tse's operations grew in complexity, and by 2016, his organization had captured the attention of law enforcement across multiple countries. That year, Taiwanese member Kai Zheng of the Bamboo Union, a notorious gang with ties to Tse, was arrested in Myanmar for trafficking ketamine. Burmese authorities seized Kai's phone, which contained critical data about Samgor's operations. This was a game changer for the AFP, as as the phone's contents included images of Tse, confirming his identity and further revealing the full scope of Sam Gore's global drug network. Information about Tse's criminal empire quickly spread to law enforcement agencies in China, Taiwan, and beyond. The cooperative effort across borders led to significant busts, most notably a huge drug seizure in 2017, where 1.2 tons of methamphetamine were found in Geraldton, Western Australia. Despite these breakthroughs, Tse continued to evade capture. His anonymity and ability to operate in the shadows made him elusive. It wasn't until October 14, 2019 that Tse's criminal activities were exposed to the public, when Reuters published an extensive report detailing his operations. The AFP, armed with this information, issued an arrest notice through Interpol. However, in a move that demonstrated his careful caution, Tse managed to get a hold of the AFP's internal document before the media release. The warning allowed him to take measures to distance himself from his criminal network. The publication of the Reuters report marked the beginning of the end for Tse's empire. As word spread that Tse's true identity had been revealed, his associates began distancing themselves. The walls were closing in, but Tse, always one step ahead, continued to move freely within Southeast Asia, particularly the Greater China area. Reports indicated that Tse had been residing in Taipei for several years, where he managed to live under the radar despite the scrutiny surrounding him. Tse's luck began to run out in early 2020 when he entered Taiwan as a visitor just before the onset of the global COVID-19 pandemic. His biggest mistake. Due to the pandemic's travel restrictions, Tse extended his stay under temporary provisions. This move, however, did not escape the attention of Taiwanese authorities. The National Police Agency obtained a court order to keep him under surveillance. Reports surfaced suggesting that Tse had settled into an upscale neighborhood in Taipei, accompanied by hired bodyguards for his protection. In late 2020, the Taiwanese Ministry of Justice Investigation Bureau interviewed with Tse. Despite growing suspicion, Taiwan's legal system found insufficient grounds to arrest him. This was largely due to Taiwan's lack of an extradition treaty with Australia and the absence of any crimes he had committed during his stay. Nevertheless, the Taiwanese authorities refused Tse's application to extend his visa status further and began preparations for his deportation. In January 2021, after nearly a year in Taiwan, Tse was deported. The Taiwanese government informed Dutch and Australian officials about Tse's departure to prevent him from reaching Canada, where he held citizenship. As Tse's flight itinerary took him to Amsterdam before continuing on to Canada, authorities in the Netherlands were primed for his arrival. On January 22, 2021, after stepping off his flight from Taiwan, Tse was arrested without incident. The arrest was the climax of Operation Kung Ge, a coordinated effort involving Australian, Dutch, Taiwanese, and various international law enforcement agencies, including the DEA. Tse's capture was hailed as a significant victory for global drug law enforcement, but a senior UNODC official pointed out that it might not spell the end of Sam Gore. Due to the organization's decentralized nature, the arrest of one individual would not be enough to dismantle the entire network, as there were plenty of capable figures ready to step into Tse's shoes. The legal battle that followed was lengthy. In July 2021, a Dutch court approved Tse's extradition to Australia to face trial. As of November 2021, however, the only charge against him was a drug smuggling count related to evidence from the 2013 surveillance. Despite the charges, the full extent of Tse's criminal activities remained a topic of intense legal scrutiny. In December 2022, Tse was finally extradited to Australia. Upon his arrival in Melbourne, he was arraigned in the magistrates' court, facing charges of conspiracy to traffic drugs dating back to 2012 and 2013. The evidence presented connected Tse with key figures in the Australian drug network, including Suki Liu. Tse did not apply for bail during his arraignment, and as of August 2024, his trial was still pending. The world would have to wait to see if Tse would be convicted for his role in one of the largest transnational drug networks of the 21st century. But what do you think? Will they finally dismantle his network? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more.